So today's theme is autumn, past and present, poetry of the seasons. And depending on where you are, it may feel like this is a little early to be talking about, and it also may feel like it's a little late to be talking about. The weather's been pretty interesting everywhere. But I thought we could take this as an opportunity to also think about poetry that discusses not just the season as we properly think about it, but the more liminal spaces between seasons as well. So some of the poems that I've included are sort of more liminally autumnal, if you will. I'm going to start by sharing a few poems from a really beautiful collection of calligraphic fragments, and it's housed at the University of Oregon. It's the Tekagami and Kyogire Japanese Calligraphy Collection. And there are roughly 319 fragments that are included in this book that was compiled about mid to late 1800s. But it includes poetic fragments calligraphed by a number of different calligraphers who are writing out poems from a number of different collections over the course of many centuries. So I've just sort of picked at random some autumn-themed poems from this beautiful collection because I thought it would be so wonderful for us to be looking at some of the images, particularly for those pre-modern poems where we have such a close connection between the linguistic nature of the poem, the calligraphic visual nature of the poem, and the material nature in the sense of what it's being composed on. So all of the images that are from the pre-modern era, before 1600, are from this collection at the University of Oregon, and it's open access. So I highly recommend anyone who has interest to go take a look. They're really, really beautiful works of art. I have structured the poems so that the opening line at the top of the slide is the poem transcribed in Japanese. And then there's the romaji below. And then this is roughly how most of the slides are. And then the translation below that. And below the translation is the source of the poem when it was originally compiled or published in pre-modern times. And then the translation that I am using for each poem. So this first poem is from the Kokin Wakashu, a collection of poems, ancient and modern. And because I would love to have a conversation about the poems, and if you have some particular element of a poem you would like to talk about, then please take a note of the number of the poem somewhere on your computer or on a piece of scratch paper, so that once we've concluded the initial reading of the poems, then we can go back and discuss them. So this is poem number 1. And I'll just read the English for the sake of time, but we can always go back and look at the Japanese if that becomes a source of interest. To my eyes, it is not clear that autumn has come, but the chill whisper of the invisible wind startles me to awareness. And you'll notice how different the paper and the calligraphic style is on each of the poems. It's really a lovely and varied collection. Poem number 2. This one is from the Japanese and Chinese poems to sing, the Wakan Roei-shu. Like so many brocades rolled out, these colored leaves of oak appear through the gaps in the mist on Sao Mountain. Poem number 3 is also from the Kokin Wakashu, and it reads, this one is by Laurel Rasplica Rod, who is a particular favorite of mine as far as translation goes. Flying wing in wing across the white clouds of the night sky, the wild geese go, their very number vivid beneath the autumn moon. Poem number 4 is from the Shin Kokinshu, New Poems of Ancient and Modern Japan. No, New Collection of Poems, Ancient and Modern. Also translated by Rod. On an autumn night, as the moon takes its lodging in glowing dewdrops, my flowing sleeves are cooled by wind from the tips of reeds. And then I wanted to jump forward in time to discuss a couple of poems that are quite famous by the haiku poet Matsuo Basho. The images that are included in these next 2 slides are not from the Tekagami and Kyogire digital exhibition. They're from another source. And if you have interest in pursuing them, that information will be in the slides that I share next week after the session is over. And this image is one that was composed by Basho himself, and it's quite famous, and it's one of my favorites. And because it's haiku and it's quite short, I think I'll just read the Japanese as well. Kare eda ni karasu no tomarikeri, aki no kure. On withered branches, the crows at rest, autumn nightfall. This is also one of Basho's most famous poems, and it comes at the end of Okuno Hosomichi, the narrow road to the north. I believe it's translated by Donald Keene as the title. But it has dozens and dozens of translations. And so I thought that for this one in particular, it would be interesting to look at a few translations. These are just 3 of so many translations. So the hokku reads, Hamaguri no futami ni wakare, yuku akizo. And the first translation, which is by Donald Keene, reads, parting at futami, dividing like clam and shells, we go with the fall. The second is by Hiroaki Sato. A clam separates lid from flesh as autumn departs. And the final translation is by Helen Craig McCullough. Off to futami, loath to part as clam from shell in waning autumn. And there's something quite sweet and plaintive about this poem, the image of the clam representing so many things in both departure in both nature and departure from friends. And the image that you see here is one that was composed by a very big fan, a mega fan of Matsuo Basho's, Yosabu Son, who his heyday was the century after Basho's, and he wrote this tribute to Basho's Okuno Hosomichi, and was very well known for his painting as well as his own poetry, haiku in particular. And so this scene of them, friends departing like a clam parting from its shell in autumn is, I think it's quite touching. Oh, and this is number 6, I apologize. And then the previous poem was number 5. That was the Kare eda ni on withered branches poem. So next, we're going to move away from the visuals and going to jump forward in time quite a bit to a very famous collection by Machi Tawara, which is called Salad Anniversary. And Tawara Machi is very famously known for reinvigorating classical Japanese poetic forms for a modern audience. And so just the English translations are here, and I chose several of them just to get a taste of what kind of poetic style she has. And all of these poems are translated by Juliet Winters Carpenter, one of the most prolific translators out there and really incredibly talented. Unable to say what waits to be said this early afternoon, we focus on the baseball game. And these first set of Machi Tawara poems consist of number 7 in our selection. Rise, pale sun, this autumn premonition of losing you. Moon of the 16th night, whatever thread that bound us snapped. Autumn night, wanting a small romance. Parsley on the veranda, turning slightly yellow. At the speed of the spreading sunset, croquettes in the back of the butcher shop fry a golden brown. Persimmons sent from home, their warm glow brightens my single room. Your blue sweater passed in ceremony through the station gate and disappeared. And that set was number 8. And the final poem I'd like to share is quite a departure and also moving a little bit back in time from Machi Tawara's work. This is by the poet Rin Ishigaki, and it's called Clams, and it's translated by Janine Beichman, another fantastic translator scholar who has brought us many, many literary gems. Shijimi Clams. Oh, and this is number 9. And I invite you to think about that basho poem of the parting ways at Futami as you listen to this. Woke up in the dead of night. In a corner of the kitchen, the little clams I'd bought that evening were alive, mouths open. At dawn, I'll gobble you up, each and every one. Let out a cackle like an evil old witch. After that, couldn't help it, had to sleep all night with mouth half open.